All right, let's give some predictions. Now, as you guys well know, who have hung out here for a while, the single one thing that I have proven to you, and I've proven it time and time, event after event, year after year, in all fairness. I mean, I've got quite a streak here. The last person you want to give you a prediction that you are then going to part your money with is me. But I do feel like week after week, I mean, just the odds got to be my favorite. I got to be getting one pretty soon. And I think I seem to have an affinity for underdogs. I think that's true. And I think I also have an inability to let go of the old guard. I tend to cling to it. And history does tell us that of all the advantages you can talk about in fighting, experience being one that means nothing, height, which is nothing, reach, which is nothing, weight is nothing. The youth advantage is a very real thing. So take it with a grain of salt. But when I do look, and let's just run through it real fast. First off, let's start with Rose and Andrade, okay? If you're a new fan, or you're even a fan that saw their first fight, but maybe you don't remember that clearly. You're in a living room with people, and there's some food, and there's some drink, and it was a long time ago. Okay, great. But if you go back and you look at the result of that fight, you're going to have a very deceptive impression of the actual match, because Rose was not only winning that fight, I would put it as far as dominating. She was kind of cruising to victory. And this was about 7.5 minutes in when something went very wrong, and all of a sudden Rose has lost the fight. One thing that is significantly different in this fight, and possibly the only thing that is different, but it's different to the advantage of Rose very clearly, at least for me, is it is not a 5-round contest. It's scheduled for 3. A lot has been made out of the fact that Rose has been out for a period of time. And there is only one athlete who can take a meaningful amount of time off and come back and not miss a beat, and that athlete is named Dominick Cruz. But next to Dominick Cruz, it might be Rose, and that would be a step down. Never the significant injuries and never the significant layoffs, but Rose does appear to do better with a clear head. She's a very emotional fighter, but she's also a very cerebral fighter. And when her head and mind is clear, by example, I don't feel there's going to be any motivation on Rose lost because this isn't for the title. I don't feel there's going to be any motivation on Rose to gain or overperform because it's a rematch. I don't think those things matter. Rose also likes a new experience. I say this from a personal relationship with Rose. Pat Barry has told me this. They like to take fights in locations they've never been to. They're a couple. He's the head corner man. They like to go somewhere they haven't been, by example. The fact that there's going to be no crowd there for them uniquely is a new experience, and they see it as a positive. And the fact that this fight, in conjunction with the narrative of the layoff of Rose and the question of what is that going to mean, I think serves her well that it's only scheduled for 15 minutes. If she can just duplicate what she did last time, in fact, if she even shows up diminished from last time, but Andrade doesn't show up any better than last time, Rose cruises to victory. If you do look at the simple mathematics of this, I'm going to go with Rose as you move on in the card. And you look at Jan versus Aldo, I'm just not willing to accept that all those best days are behind him. Look, I think there's 3 things that you need to study there. First is the weight class of 135 pounds. And many people, Ariel Helwani included, who I have had knockdown, drag-out arguments with, do not believe Aldo even belongs in this shot. Does not believe he's deserving, and the argument for that is he's been at 135 pounds one time in his career and he lost that fight. Well, excuse me, I see it a little bit differently. First off, he looked great in that fight. He really did. It was a split decision. One judge even thought that he won. The audience that was there live almost unanimously thought he won. Either way, I do understand that he lost, but I do look at that as an experiment. I look at that as a guy who had never been to the weight class, who had never performed in that weight class, where the speed is just a little bit different, a little bit faster, where you're just a little bit lighter, where you can't go in and bully yourself around just as much. Your energy is also a little bit different because of the physical restraints and stresses you put on your body just to make bantamweight for the first time. And like the old expression goes, your first time doesn't count really is true. You're doing your whole career all over again when you go down to that new weight class, and I do expect him to be better. He's also, point number 2, trained with Peter Yan before. Everybody that saw those workouts, including Yan and Aldo, coaches and teammates, all said Aldo won every single round they did. Now, how much does that matter? Aldo was bigger at the time. Yan was a guest in the country, so he wasn't even sleeping comfortably in his own bed with his own surroundings and with his own friends and teammates, and Aldo was the champion of the world. I imagine there was a respect factor. I'm not trying to argue because Aldo got the best of him in practice years ago that translates to now, but what I will share with you is that the mask is off at this point. All these fighters with these great records and this big hype and media around them, they have a bit of a mask. They have a bit of an allure. Well, if you've trained with the guy or you know him personally, that mask is off. You're not in awe. Yan could make the same argument if your team, Yan, that he's not going to be in awe of the great Jose Aldo. I will concede to that, but I, in this case, am going to choose to believe that favors Aldo, and ultimately is the hunger question. And when you've climbed a mountain as many times as Aldo has, it's very fair for the rest of us to sit back and try to speculate, how much hunger do you actually have to do it again? And words are very easy, but actions speak volumes. And when you look at the actions of Jose Aldo changing his physiology, sleeping more at night, taking in less calories while burning more, getting extra workouts, extra runs later in his life just to make the weight class, I think those actions are meaningful, and I think he has answered the question that he's very hungry. I'm going with the return of Jose Aldo. You move into the co-main event. This is a tough one. And it's a tough one for me personally because it appears that my eyes played tricks on me. I watched those two fight the first time. I thought Max won. I thought he won to the point that when they went to the judges' scorecards and as Bruce Buffer was entering the octagon, when the whole 5 rounds is completed and they're about to make the announcement, I was very confident they were going to announce and knew. Well, not only did I have that wrong, this was a unanimous decision, which, by the way, wasn't even close. One judge gave all 5 rounds to Volkanovski, and I believe the other 2 gave 4 rounds to Volkanovski. So I saw something that the guys who mattered didn't. But I wasn't the only one. I mean, there's a reason that Volkanovski is the one that asked Dana for the rematch. He didn't like the narrative that was out there. He didn't like the dialogue that was out there, that he never should have been awarded this championship. He said, Dana, give me him one more time and give me him for 5 more rounds. I'm going to close the book on this guy and move on. I think that that's a real motivation for Volkanovski, but I do think that Max made one critical error in that fight, which is all of Max's movements were forward at all times. Usually that's a good thing. But Max, that has this sizable reach over his opponent, Max being one of the guys in all of combat, boxing included, that actually knows how to use reach and keep a guy at the end of his punches, do your damage, and get out of the way without taking any back. When he only moved forward, it did look at times, perception-wise, I believe to the judges that he was hurt. Looked like he was stumbling forward, by example. Made the judges go, whoa, I think Max is hurt. I think if Max had just gone a little bit more side to side, maybe even at times he backed up, which you're allowed to do in this form of combat. Floyd Mayweather only goes backwards, by example. Sugar Ray Robinson trained 5 miles a day, ran backwards only. You can do that in this sport and not look like you're stalling. There's ways to control it, particularly when you have the reach. I think if Max goes side to side or even backwards, mixes that up 70-30, 80-20, but doesn't just march a guy down when you have the reach advantage, I think it's going to serve him. I'm taking Max Holloway, and ultimately in the main event, I think you have a superior athlete in Kamaru Usman. And not just a superior athlete to his opponent, which is going to be Masvidal, I think to everybody. I think for the first time ever, you have an athlete in Kamaru Usman where if you want to go out and have a conversation of who the greatest welterweight of all time is, it's the first time ever that you can compare somebody to Georges St. Pierre and not look stupid doing it. If any time in your life you ever go, well, I really think this other welterweight was better than George, you're going to look like a fool. And there's no nicer way for me to say it. You're going to lose credibility on the spot for the first time ever. there appears to be a meaningful conversation that you could spark and go back and forth a little bit. You're probably still going to lose the argument if you try to say somebody's passed up George, but you could now have the argument. I mean, that's how good of an athlete Kamaru is. When you put that in conjunction with the fact that he knew he had a fight, with the fact that the last 30 days he didn't take his eye off the ball, with the fact that he doesn't have to lose 22 pounds in 5 days total after a 15-hour flight against the world. And look, those things truly are splitting hairs. That's not the biggest deal, that burden that I just laid out for Masvidal, but you're playing a game of inches right now. And you're playing it against decisively the best in the world. Against probably very decisively the number one contender for his spot, but you are still talking about something that's different. And ultimately, I could see more ways for Usman to win. Masvidal's going to give him problems. I don't agree with the fact that Masvidal didn't know about this fight and he's going to get thrown down and beat up. Nobody's ever thrown Masvidal and just beat him up. Masvidal's going to have his moments. Masvidal can do some things up the middle that other guys can't do. Not only with kicks, he can do them with knees, he can do them with uppercuts, he controls the center very well, he doesn't back down, and his wrestling defense is on point. I mean, whatever heat he's got with Colby Covington, not for nothing, training every day with Colby Covington is going to make you pretty damn good at stopping takedowns. I don't know that I fully buy into that argument that he just gets thrown down and somebody controls him. I'm having a hard time with that one. We're going to have to see the fight, but if you want my prediction, I think I'm going to go Usman, Aldo. I like Max, believe it or not, and I'm taking Thug Rose.